I've always had a passion for being around and learning about animals. When I was younger, going to zoos and animal parks was always a part of my life. I wanted to share my passion with family and friends, so I started working with people that loved animals as much as I did, and my YouTube channel was born. Welcome back to my animal education series. Today I'm here with Jason at the science boating here at SIU-E. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good.
All right.
So, what do you study here at SIU-E?
So, well, first, thanks for asking me to come on, Cole. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
But I study primarily overwintering insects, and during my past work, I used to study how insects would survive winter, and they can do so in a variety of ways. Obviously, you don't see them out flying or doing what they do in the wintertime, but what they primarily do is they kind of hunker down, especially in temperate zones, Midwest and higher elevated areas, latitudinal areas. And what they do is they just kind of go into dormancy. And some insects are going to be buffered from extreme low temperatures, but other insects are going to be exposed to extremely low temperatures. So I primarily study how those animals exposed to extreme low temperatures can survive.
So how do you exactly do that here?
In a variety of ways. So we can measure how well they can resist freezing, and the way I do that is I have a bath right here, and this bath can go down to minus 40 degrees Celsius. So I can put them in there, I can program a temperature, and it'll slowly drop the temperature on them until they freeze. And then I can take them out to see if they survive freezing, which then would be called a freeze-tolerant insect, or most insects are freeze susceptible and they die if they freeze. But right now what I'm doing is I'm studying a freeze-tolerant insect called the Urasa soldaginus, a golden-mouthed gallfly. And that guy is really cool. It can survive freezing. The ones around here in this area can survive freezing down to minus 40 degrees, minus 50 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
In the winter. And you could take them out of the freezer then and put them on the bench, and a little while later they'll crawl away.
Is that what's here in the incubators?
Well, what I'm doing with these incubators right now is I am studying, primarily my research in the past has been looking at how these insects are able to survive freezing, what physiological mechanisms allow them to survive freezing. But what I'm doing with this particular experiment is I'm looking at potential negative effects of elevated winter temperatures. Because we all know about climate change, and it's interesting, especially in the temperate zone where we live, climate change is going to have a much greater impact in elevating winter temperatures than it will have on elevating summer temperatures. So what I'm asking questions about is, does elevated winter temperatures, is that detrimental to insects? And one way you can look at that is how much metabolic reserves they have throughout winter. Because you don't see insects flying about, you don't see insects active, and there's not much food for insects to eat in winter. So basically they just kind of go into a hibernative state called diapause. And when in diapause, their metabolism greatly gets shut down, but they must maintain all those metabolic reserves through winter, so they have something left to typically either find mates and produce eggs and lay, or even develop first into an adult before they find mates and lay eggs. So what the questions I'm asking is, does the elevated winter temperature influence their metabolism enough? Because even in their diapause or a suppressed metabolic state, it's still dependent on temperature. So the lower the temperature, the lower metabolic rate. The higher the temperature they're exposed to, the higher metabolic rate they have. And the idea is, if they're exposed to higher metabolic or higher elevated temperatures, will that be sufficient for the metabolic rate to use up all their energetic reserves, and they won't have any left to develop in the spring?
So you explained this before we turn on the camera. But I see you have two different kinds of incubators here. So what are you doing with each kind?
So I have 4 replicate incubators, 2 of which are at temperatures of which the animals would normally experience average winter temperatures over the last 100 years. And I have another set of incubators that are being exposed to elevated winter temperatures based on projections of climate change for this area 100 years from now. So I have a normal, quote-unquote normal temperature regime and an elevated temperature regime. But within that, within the normal and with the elevated temperature regimes, I have 2 distinct groups. I have one group, this is my low temperature, one of my low temperature, or not necessarily low temperature, but average temperature incubators. And what I have here is this incubator is being subjected to not only the average winter temperatures by month, but it's cycling by diurnal temperature. So it has a same average winter temperature that you'd find in the environment, but it's being subjected to diurnal high and low temperatures throughout the winter. That is unique because most studies that examine overwintering insects and exposure to temperatures and developmental rates and energetic reserves utilize a different approach, which I'm doing in this incubator right here. This incubator is just subjecting them to average monthly means with no diurnal variation in temperature. So the question is, does diurnal exposure to diurnal fluctuating temperatures have a greater impact on their overwintering survival, use of energetic reserves, compared to what's normally done, which is just a static single temperature throughout the winter?
So I'm pretty sure most people out there are wondering, like, have you found any results for this yet to prove your point?
Well, some preliminary results. It's actually pretty cool. Some preliminary results have been suggesting that diurnal temperatures are much more favorable for insects to survive winter, because even though they're subjected to much higher temperatures in the diurnal cycle, they're going to get an elevated metabolic rate to those increased temperatures. The lower temperatures that they're exposed to are much more favorable overall because they really crank down their metabolism at those low temperatures. So preliminary studies suggest that diurnal fluctuating regimes are much more beneficial to insects than just exposing them to a single static average temperature through winter, which is typically what's been done in the field.
So you're studying how they would do better with varying temperatures, but how do they exactly survive freezing?
Oh, so these guys are pretty awesome, they're pretty cool. They can survive freezing to extreme low temperatures, and they do that with a variety of mechanisms. One of them is they produce these compounds called cryoprotectants. And cryoprotectants are low molecular mass polyols and sugars like glycerol, sorbitol. If you are frogs, certain frogs can survive freezing, and then they use glucose as a cryoprotectant. But what they do is they flood their systems with cryoprotectants seasonally. So as they transition from fall to winter animals, they produce cryoprotectants, and it's just like it reduces the amount of ice in their body at a given temperature. Because if you get too much ice, that's not a good thing. You have to maintain a certain level of ice in the body. Right around, you can only have right around 70% of your body water freeze.
So there are a lot of freeze-tolerant insects. So what is one of the more well-known species?
Well, if we look at all insects and how they overwinter, most are freeze susceptible. So most die if they freeze, but there are a considerable number that can survive freezing. So in addition to frogs, some frogs, some turtles, and some snakes, there's a handful of insects that can do this. There's a number here in our area, like the golden-rod gulfly, which I study. There are a really cool animal called the Arctic woolly bear caterpillar, which is in Greenland and some other places, and it takes so long in its development. It needs 16 to 18 years before it goes from a woolly-bellied caterpillar to the adult.
Wow.
And every winter it freezes and thaws during its lifetime. Probably the most well-known freeze-tolerant insects are the extremes in size. So the largest freeze-tolerant insect is the weta in New Zealand. And in addition to being the largest freeze-tolerant insect, it's really cool because it doesn't have the typical cryoprotectants that most insects have that are freeze-tolerant. So it's kind of a mystery how this guy is able to survive freezing, but it's really cool that it does.
Maybe that'll be a future episode. Maybe. But thank you for telling us all this information that even I didn't know as an animal person. It's very interesting and very informative.
Sure. Hey, I appreciate it. Appreciate being on.
Thank you. And if you guys enjoyed this week's episode, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and also check out my Instagram @Culture. And as always, I'll see you next week.